Hello, my name is Karen Bosch. I'm a K through 8 technology teacher in the Metro Detroit area, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about something that I have been experimenting with on the iPad, which is called visual note taking, or sometimes it is known as sketch notes. I first became acquainted with this whole process at the Apple Distinguished Educator Conference this past summer in July of 2013 when one of the ADEs, Brad Ovenell Carter, started posting all these great visual notes that he was taking of the different sessions at the conference. And I became quite fascinated with it and just became curious about whether it was something that I could do as well. I am not an artist. I am not a graphic designer. I just am an ordinary person. But I just find the process very fascinating, and so I've been asked to share a little bit about some of the things that I've been doing and some of my work process. And I decided probably the best way to do that was to actually do it by using some sketch notes that I've made myself. So here you can see my sketchnote notebook. This is in an app called FlipInk, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that one and why I chose it in a few minutes. So what is visual note taking? Basically, it is instead of just taking a bunch of notes using words and text, it is a combination of using text in kind of meaningful ways. You're not trying to get every detail, but you're really pulling out the main ideas that really resonate with you and trying to combine them with pictures and images that illustrate what is being spoken about. And then using all kinds of different graphic organizers, bullets and frames and lines and arrows and all kinds of connectors and symbols to try and make a picture of what is being presented. And usually people do it with speeches or at conferences, but you could also possibly do it with something that you have read and do it not necessarily by listening, but by reading. So why take visual notes? I've listened to several great videos on YouTube by Sunny Brown, who is a real advocate for doing the visual note taking. And in fact, you can actually make a living by doing this. There's some people who do that. And one of the things that she talks about is that you're incorporating many different learning styles when you're taking visual notes. First of all, you're listening, so you're using auditory learning style. But then you're also becoming visual because you're drawing pictures and trying to form pictures of what you're learning. And then the kinesthetic part is being used because you're actually doing something as you're listening, not just listening. And she says that there's a lot of scientific studies to show that visual note-taking, doing things in a visual way, increases your listening. You really have to listen very actively if you're doing it. Your comprehension goes up because you're processing it as you're listening. Your recall goes up. There's a lot of evidence to show that we remember things that are visual, images, pictures, much more than just spoken words or words that we see on the page. And then it stretches your creativity. And if you're an educator, you know that creativity is at the top of the Bloom scale. And so we're really moving your thinking way up into the upper regions of thinking, which helps you to remember and process and then synthesize your information. So there's a lot of advantages to using visual note-taking. So what's the process? Well, you just have to kind of dive in. I mean, there's just no way around it. You just have to try it. And my initial thoughts were, well, how do I know how to organize things because I don't know what the speaker is going to say? It sometimes helps if you develop some kind of a heading at the top that you kind of standardized. I've seen several people that do that, but you just have to dive in and try it. And it really helps if you can find some other people who are doing it and start following them. I have some people on Twitter that I've looked at. I've watched some videos. I've made a Pinterest board. I've downloaded a book that I put on my iPad to give me ideas. But you can really learn a lot by finding other people who are involved with visual note taking. And you really just need to practice. You find things that you like listening to and start working on doing it. I started doing it on sermons at my church, but I've also done it with podcasts. People do it at conferences. I've heard of people that do it at faculty meetings, just any place that you can come across. I mean, you could probably do it with a TV show. And then if you wanted to do it with text-based, you could probably do it with books. But you just have to practice. And sometimes it looks great, and sometimes it looks awful. You have an option of doing it either with 1 or 2 steps. Now, the 1 step means that you do the entire note from beginning to end while you're listening. I tend to like doing it in 2 steps just because I don't always know exactly what I want to put on the page. I will listen and do a lot of the text part of it first, and then at a later date, sometimes I will come home and then I will add more of the color, more of the pictures, more of the graphic organizers, because I kind of know the structure of what I listen to. And I really like that because that second step of finishing up the note really helps me to reflect upon what I've learned and synthesize it, so I think it's very helpful. Now, a lot of people who started doing this just do it in notebooks, but now with the iPad, obviously apps can be used for it, which are kind of cool. And so again, if you're doing it with a notebook, you probably would have different kinds of pens, but if you're doing it on an iPad, it definitely is helpful to have a stylus. So just a couple words about styluses. I have some very inexpensive styluses that I order from Amazon. They cost about 50 cents each. I get them cheap because the kids tend to pick at the little tip at the end and they don't last long, so I figure I might as well get something inexpensive for them to use. When I started doing this, I did invest a little bit of money into getting some better styluses. I bought an Adobe Pro, which has a nice fine point. I think I need a new tip because it kind of sticks right now, but I do like it. I must say I don't love it, but I like it. I also bought a Sensu brush, which I really like a lot, which gives you the feeling of actually painting on your iPad. It also has a great little stylus at the end of the brush, on the opposite end, and I actually end up using that stylus a lot because it has just a nice firm tip with a nice give to it. So the apps that you can use, there's quite a few of them out there. I've experimented with a variety of them. My favorite at this point is FlipInk, and I will demonstrate that in a little bit and tell you why I particularly like that one. Paper 53 probably is the favorite of artists and people that are involved with graphics. The things I like about Paper 53, it is very artistic, great community. There's a wonderful flow to all the tools. What I don't like about it, it's free, but you really have to pay about $10 to unlock all the tools and the colors, so really it's pretty useless unless you unlock them. I don't like that you can't customize the tools. You can't make them thicker or more transparent. You're kind of stuck with the set that's there, which I know a lot of artistic people like. I find that frustrating. And I find that they've got some gestures for zooming and for undoing that I find kind of awkward. I've had a hard time getting used to. But it is a neat app, and it particularly has a great flow to the tools. Sketchbook X is free. They also have a pro version that will unlock more features for you. I do like this one because it does let you customize the tools. It has layers, which are really nice. What I don't particularly like about it is I don't think the two tools have a nice flow to them, and it really doesn't have a nice watercolor effect in the free version, which I really like having the watercolor effect. And then Adobe Ideas is another app that is free. And the good features of this, again, is it does have layers. It has 5 tools, and I'd say 3 of them are really nice. I don't like that there's really no texture to the pencil tool, and there really is no flow to the watercolor. And so that's kind of one of the minuses with that. Both Sketchbook Pro or Sketchbook X and Pro and Adobe Ideas will let you import images as well, and you can trace over them using the layers. Paper 53 will not let you put in layers or have images or text. So let me show you FlipInk a little bit, what I like about it. There's a little handle down in the corner that you can use to pop up and down the tools. You have an eraser. You have colors that are along the bottom, and you can flip open more colors and close that. There also is a really nice color wheel, so you can customize your colors. Let me show you what they look like. Here's the pencil tool, has a nice grainy look to it. The crayon tool is nice and bumpy. I like that. The ink tool is the one that I'm not in love with just because I don't think it looks super inky. I mean, it just doesn't have the nice flow that you can get from some of the other tools. Here's like a skinny marker, and then a great thin, thick, bold marker. And then probably my favorite, which is this watercolor tool. And what's nice about this is you can customize how wide and how narrow. And you can customize the transparency down to almost nothing to very, very dark. And I really, really do like those customizing features. It also, if you touch on the little plus, has some additional tools that pop up. One that I particularly like a lot is it lets you put in a grid or lines in the background, and particularly for me as a beginner, I like having some lines to help me with lining things up. It also has some fill colors, and I really like the fill colors. I just wish that you had more options to be able to customize. And so that's some of the reasons why I like FlipInk. A couple other apps that are nice that you might want to look at if you're more looking for the tech side of making notebooks. I know Penultimate is probably one of the favorite ones. And if you're more artistic, Brushes, ArtRage, and Procreate could also be used for this, but they have a lot more of the different painting textures as well. So here's a little bit about how you can think about structure as you're planning your notes. Typically we think of notes as being kind of a list, a bunch of bullet points. And that works. It works absolutely fine, but it's nice if you can kind of break yourself out of that habit. I think things become a little more visual when you look at different ways to organize it. I think it's nice if you can find a path to let your ideas flow through. All kinds of diagrams work great for this, like comparing and contrast. Word maps, sometimes that kind of organization works real well. And sometimes just doing notes where you're just kind of putting, little boxes where the things that are sticking out to you and just kind of putting them in different sections on your visual note works well. So those are just a few ideas of ways that people can organize their notes. The second thing you'll probably need to think through is text. And you probably need to have at least 3 different kinds of text to add variety to your notes. Just your basic printing works well, and everyone has their own personality as they print, so don't worry that it's not particularly neat as long as you can read it. It can have a little bit of an edge to it. You can use both all caps and then a lowercase kind of printing works well, so you've got a little bit of variety. And then if you take that basic printing and make it bold, either by making your line really thick or going over it several times. And if you do that, you really have 3 different kinds of text that you can use. If you've got handwriting that looks pretty good, kind of a script kind of text is nice. I like using that for quotations or things that I want to remember. And then experiment with making text that shows something, that has drama, or maybe that has a glow to it. You can do things with text that make it represent what you're talking about, like breaking it into pieces for something being broken. So that's something that sometimes a word just will jump out at you that you can do something creative with. And then sometimes it's fun to do an outline. If you're good, you can just do in basic outline text, or you can just color in the inside and then draw around the outside would also work. And then as you work at this, you can maybe develop some kind of fancy text. And fancy doesn't necessarily have to be hard, just by putting little dots at the end of your text or slanting it, or maybe even adding some little lines to it. All of those things will look very effective on your paper. And probably the biggest thing is you need to practice, practice, practice. Just putting up a page on your iPad and practicing different kinds of text really will help you out with this, because text is very uncomfortable at first when you're writing, and particularly when you're trying to write fast. And then the drawings are pretty important. And you say, well, I'm not particularly an artist. Well, neither am I. But I think you can do quite a lot just by using simple shapes. Again, practicing, looking online for ideas will give you ideas of how you can put simple shapes together to make things like books or buildings or things like that. And don't worry, stick figures are kind of the way to go here. And again, practicing, trying to do different kinds of stick figures and giving them movement and giving them actions and putting things in their hands. One of the tricks that I have used is I will sketch very lightly with a pencil on my iPad in a real narrow light setting, and then we'll go back when I get the drawing the way I like and we'll darken it. Let me demo that a minute for you. I'm going to switch over to a marker here. And one of the things I did not show you is that you can pinch on FlipInk to get in closer. And then so you can see here, I kind of sketched out my idea. And now I can come back, now that I've got it in the place that I like, and I can add things onto it. I'm going to go here now and maybe add a little bit of a glow to it. Let's see what this looks like. And if I don't like something, the undo, you can use an eraser, but if you've already got stuff in the area, you don't want to erase that. So if you put 2 fingers on your iPad, this little bar will pop up, and then you just kind of slide it back, and it will go ahead and undo the things that you've just done. So there we have a little trick. I also, if I'm looking for ideas, I confess that I will use my phone and I will Google for Clipart for ideas. If I'm like, I want to make a sheep, I have no idea how to actually do that. And usually I can find, some kind of line representation that I can figure out that, oh, I think I could make that. So that is one of my other little tricks that I use. So finally, one of the really big parts of doing your sketch notes is you have to come up with ideas of how to organize it. Using all kinds of boxes and shapes as frames. I love using the word clouds, speech bubbles, develop all kinds of arrows that you can use, circles and with lines to connect. All kinds of lines are really, really important. They really do pull things together. Brackets, and then just little icons that you can use to emphasize things, lightning bolts and hearts and all of those kinds of things. And again, looking online gives you lots of ideas of things that you could possibly use in developing your sketch notes. So what I'd like to do now is just close up this little notebook in FlipInk and just show you a few examples of what I've done. And again, what I've really experimented with is sermon notes. This is one of the first ones that I did, and you'll get to see kind of how my style has evolved. And actually this one I think I did in another app first, so this was like a second attempt at this. This one here you can see it was talking about a thread, so I tried to put together a thread of all the different points kind of running through the notes that I made, which I thought was kind of fun, like trying to get away from the notes to organize things. Here talking about Mount Sinai, so I decided to try and put it on a mountain and contrast the different parts between the covenant and the law, which it turned out okay. And here's one that was on the tabernacle, and so I actually went online to find a picture because I figured that was easier than trying to draw things. Sometimes you find notes, topics that just don't have a whole lot visual that you can think of to put in, and you end up doing more organizing with color and text. This one was one of them where I went online to find a picture of a lamb on my iPhone, some Clipart, because I needed some ideas how to draw it. This is another one I was really experimenting, trying to add more color. And this was one where topic was trust the king, and so I put this nice king on the side. I did that during while the sermon was going on, and then realized partway through that the king that they were talking about wasn't a worldly king, but was God. So, it's kind of like one of them. They go, oh, okay, well, that wasn't exactly what that was supposed to be. I like this one where I used a path to show different steps. I thought that was kind of fun. Here you can see how I used the broken to break up the text. Again, this was one where I Googled an idea to come up with a drawing. Here's one, didn't really work real well, didn't like it, never finished it. You can see my style kind of now is kind of like a lot of soft watercolory colors. Another one, not particularly liking, never finished. This one was from a podcast that I listened to. And this one in particular, I went in, I loved the idea. You talked about a hang glider, so I Googled to find a hang glider and also the trapeze. Had no idea how to put that together, so I used some Google Clipart to help me. And then this was another podcast, and this was one where sizing-wise, I did a lot of things really small, and then when the podcast was done, I thought, oh, I probably could have made my text bigger, but oh well, that's the way it is. And this is one that's in process that I haven't finished yet. So there you can see a little bit about how visual note-taking can be used. I find it a very intriguing idea. I think it really does help me personally listen better and remember things better, and I just really like the creative process that I go through when I'm doing it. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a feeling of how you could possibly either use visual note-taking personally or maybe in your classroom. Thank you very much for listening. If you want more information about this, You could follow me on Twitter. My name is Carly B there. And I also have a website at tinyurl.com/iPadCreate. Will link you to a Google website that talks about all kinds of iPad's apps being used for creativity, not just visual note taking, but anything creative that you can do on the iPad. And so you might want to check that out as well. Thank you.